I'm Hendrik. I come from Germany. I live in Dortmund, where I founded the Java User Group Dortmund a lot of years ago, and I'm one of the co-founders of the company Karakun, I work all my work time on Java, not only on customer projects, but also on open source projects and on community projects, or in general for the community, like doing sessions like I do today, or I'm part of 2 expert groups at the JSR. So I help, for example, to do the specification of bean validation. And one thing where I currently spend a lot of my time is Eclipse Adoptium, which is the successor of AdoptOpenJDK, that has a goal to provide vendor neutral and free Java binaries, as we will see later. Next to this, my more important, maybe my social skills and what I'm in, I collect and love board games. I love Star Wars. Quite happy that a lot of Star Wars things happen these years. I listen to hard rock, and I love dogs. Okay, so that's enough from me. Let's have a look at what we are talking about today. As I already mentioned, we will talk about the OpenJDK, have a look what the OpenJDK is in general, talk about Java releases, maybe about the last Java release 17, about the Java release model and release train in general, and how Java releases are structured within the OpenJDK. And afterwards, we will have a look at distributions, at JavaOne times that are based on the OpenJDK. And here I would like to concentrate on the one where I work on, which is Eclipse Adoptium. But I will give an overview of some others and differences too. Okay. So let's start with the OpenJDK. As most of you might know, the OpenJDK is like the open source repository of Java. And under Sun, Java has been open sourced in 2006. Before that, Java was closed source. There was this like Sun JDK. And what Sun did is they created the OpenJDK, which started as an open source repository that contains the sources to create a Java runtime. And once Sun was acquired by Oracle, Oracle took over the work and continues to work with Java in the OpenJDK, and over the time, next to Oracle, several other companies and individuals followed to work with Oracle on the OpenJDK. So when you want to know more about the OpenJDK, maybe the first thing where you go is the website of the OpenJDK. And the website, from my personal point of view, is not very good. This is a screenshot from the website. On the left, you see a very, very huge menu of a lot of points, where several points you do not really understand what they mean. Then you have some general things in the center, like the third one, learn about the key active projects in the community, like Ember, Panama, Valhalla. So if you have no idea what this is, if you're maybe a beginner to Java, to the JDK or to the OpenJDK, it's very hard to get into this, because this looks quite different from, for example, a source repository that you will find on GitHub nowadays. And this is because the OpenJDK does not contain only the sources of Java runtimes. Next to this, it contains and defines the workflows and the structure of the OpenJDK. And this is a little bit what you can see on the left. Oh, is there a question? Okay. This is a little bit what you can see on the left. So in general, the OpenJDK is defined in groups and projects. And a group is like a handful or even larger crowd of people that work in one specific area. So there's, for example, the hotspot groups that work on hotspot, then the core libraries group that work on all the core Java libraries, or for example, the 2D graphics group. And then you have projects like, for example, the JDK project or OpenJFX, for example. And now groups can work on projects, and it's not that one group only works on one project. So groups can work on multiple projects. And if we go back to the page of the OpenJDK, this is what you can see here on the left, right? You see starting in the middle, the groups, and then in the bottom, the projects. And this is how it's structured, and it contains things like mailing list, some initial documentation about the groups and the projects, and so on. And next to this organ groups and projects that is for organizing the OpenJDK. The OpenJDK contains, and maybe this is the most important part, the sources to build Java. And when having a look at what we call Java or Java runtime, to be more correct, you can always split it in three different parts. First of all, we have the JVM. This is the virtual machine, the runtime that executes Java programs. Then we have the standard APIs, and this is all the Java classes that all of us use every day, like string, like local datetime, thread, executor service, and so on, exception, runtime exception, all the classes, interfaces, annotations that are part of the core Java libraries. Those are called the standard API. And then next to this, we have the tools. So the tools are all the executables, like the compiler, like the flight recorder, and so on, mission control, and so on. When having a look at these three parts and how JDK that you can download and, for example, run looks like, in the past, you've seen some kind of difference, especially when you took a look at the Oracle JDK. So for Java 8, for example, and this was a time where most of us downloaded or just downloaded the Oracle JDK like you did for Java 6, 7, and 8. You opened the Oracle page and just downloaded Java from Oracle. And what you got from Oracle was not exactly what was defined in the OpenJDK. Because as you can see, next to the JVM and the tools and APIs that are part of the OpenJDK, Oracle added some additional stuff, content, features to the Oracle JDK, to the Oracle Java runtime. Examples are the flight recorder, web start, or mission control. And such tools, when you downloaded Java or the Java runtime from Oracle, are compiled and part of the runtime, and you are able to use it. But all these tools were never open sourced. Those tools were developed by Oracle in like closed source repositories at Oracle and exclusively added to the Java distribution of Oracle to have like a benefit against other distributions. The big problem was that in the past, most people were not aware of that problem and don't understand that Oracle did some closed source stuff there. Happily today, this is not such a big problem anymore. So for example, with Java 12, the Oracle JDK is more or less equal than the OpenJDK. There are still some small changes like fonts that are based on license programs that Oracle includes another font into their runtime that cannot be open sourced because the license of the font do not allow to add it to the OpenJDK. But in general, this is fine now. One problem is that some of the tools that vendors like Oracle created on top of the things of the OpenJDK are moved to the OpenJDK. This happened to the thread recorder and mission control, for example. Other tools like Oracle WebStart were just removed. So they were never contributed as open source to the OpenJDK. Actually, there was no concrete answer from Oracle why they decided it in that way. But since all these tools were closed source, you just do not have a chance to get access to them. And all these points are quite better today, because today we have not only the Oracle JDK where you go just to Oracle and download your Java like you did with Java 7 or 8. Today we have a lot of different Java binaries, which makes it maybe a little bit harder to understand what you should use and what you can use. But on the other hand, you are more flexible. And based on this, a lot of people started to contribute to the OpenJDK. And here, not only companies or large companies started contribution to the OpenJDK, even individuals contributed to the OpenJDK. And with the Java sources moving to GitHub, or this moved to GitHub because that was finished with Java 17, a contribution to Java is since half a year way more easy than it was before, because it's now at GitHub and you can easily use the functionality of GitHub, like creating a pull request at GitHub, for example, to contribute to the OpenJDK. And this really happens here. I just have a screenshot that I took from Twitter, where Markus Karg, who is an individual from the German Java community, did it, his first contribution to the OpenJDK by creating a pull request, and after several discussions within the pull request was merged into the master, and within Java 18, the first code that was created by Markus will be part of Java. So if you want to start to contribute to Java, I can tell you that it's much better than it was some time ago, but it's not easy, still not easy, because still some good tutorials, getting started guides and things like that are missing. This is one part where we at Eclipse Adoptium discuss a lot and would like to contribute things to the community in the future. Next to individuals, a lot of companies have started to contribute to the OpenJDK. And I have just some examples. Here you can see the companies that contributed to the Java 11 release. So all these companies contributed code to Java between the Java 10 and 11 release. And you can see that most of the contributions still coming from Oracle, which is still by far the main driver behind the OpenJDK. But a lot of other companies started to contribute, like Bellsoft, Azul, IBM, Red Hat, JetBrains, and so on. And the list is even getting bigger, because when having a look at Java 16, you can see it's still Oracle that does the most, but there are more companies that are contributing to Java. One that started, for example, between 11 and 17 was Microsoft. And here you can see a list of all the companies that contributed to the OpenJDK, so to Java, between Java 11 and Java 17. And this is quite a long list of companies, and you really have some big companies here. And all these companies have different reasons why they contribute to the OpenJDK. There are some companies like, for example, Intel or ARM that want to have the OpenJDK running perfectly on their hardware. We have companies like Azure or Amazon or Bellsoft that provide their own OpenJDK distribution. So Azure has Zulu, Bellsoft Liberica, and Amazon has Pareto, for example. And then you have some huge companies like, for example, Twitter or JetBrains that do not share OpenJDK distributions, but build their own OpenJDK distributions. Twitter, for example, builds their own OpenJDK distribution to run the Twitter services on it. So as you can see, several big companies and several reasons why they are contributing to the OpenJDK. But a lot of those companies really do it because they have started or plan to start their own OpenJDK distribution. And as I already mentioned, while with, I don't know, Java 6 or 7, you normally, if you're not on a Linux machine, just downloaded Java from Oracle, and on a Linux machine, you normally just took the OpenJDK build that was accessible within your Linux repository without really thinking about how is this built and where is this coming from. Now you have a lot of Java distributions, OpenJDK distributions from different big companies, foundations, organizations. And all these companies or all these distributions have different benefits, have a different scope where it might make sense to use them, and so on. We'll have a look later at that. To call such a distribution that you are building out of the OpenJDK, I mean, everybody of us, if you get into it, everybody of us can build such distribution. But if you really want to call it a Java runtime, you need to pass the TCK, which is the Technology Compatibility Kit. This is something that came from Oracle, and this is not part of the OpenJDK. This is sadly closed source. And you need to agree on a contract with Oracle, and based on this contract, you can run the TCK against your Java binaries that you have built. And if the TCK passes, you can call your binaries Java runtime. Regarding the content of the TCK, the tests that it includes, and so on, this is closed source, and people who can use it and signed the contract with Oracle, so the OCTLA, are not allowed to talk about the content of this TCK. So this is really a black box for most people. But it belongs to Oracle, and Oracle makes money with it, because next to this, Oracle do not own the OpenJDK and things like that, but Java, for example, is a registered trademark of Oracle. And based on this, Oracle can decide who can name something a Java runtime and who's not allowed to name something a Java runtime. And when having a look at companies that have access to this TCK because they signed the OCTLA, again, the list is quite huge. So here you see the list of companies that have signed it, and you will see several companies that today provide Java binaries distributions like Azure, Amazon, Bellsoft, Eclipse Foundation, Microsoft, SAP, Red Hat, and so on. But next to this, you find even companies that do not really provide Java distribution that maybe build one, plan to build one, plan to provide one, but currently do not have one on the market. Okay, this first of all about different distributions that are built out of the JDK. Another important part of the JDK is the definition of Java releases. So when, for example, Java 11, Java 15, Java 17 came out, this was not defined by Oracle or by Amazon. This was defined by the OpenJDK and within the OpenJDK project. And again, to do so, the OpenJDK provides workflows and structure. And the two important parts here are the JAPS, which stands for JDK Enhancement Proposals and Releases. We will have a look at both of them. Both can be easily accessed on the OpenJDK web page. So I've just added an URL here for the JAP 395 and for the JDK 16 release. When you go to a release page of the OpenJDK, you will see something like this. So this is an example for JDK 13. And here you see a short description regarding license. And then at the bottom, you see a schedule like, okay, when was the release available? When did the ramp down fast started? And so on and so on. And in the middle, what is called features here is a list of all JAPs that are part of this release. So in the JDK 13 release, we have 5 JAPs, which are 350, 51, 53, 54, and 55 that are part of the JDK 13 release. And now you can click on such JAP, and then you will find a definition and description of the JAP of this new feature that has been introduced to Java within this version. And these documents are very, very good. So if you already asked yourself, okay, a new Java version comes out, how does all this blogger, all these reporters, and so on know what will be in this version and can talk about it, write about it? This is really based on this, because the JAPS defines everything you need to know. This really defines the goals, the non-goals, how it should be used, and so on. So if you want to know about a Java release, what features are in this release, you should always have a look at the JAPS and read the JAPS, because this really defines the features. When having a look at the count of features that we get with new Java releases, with a new release train, for sure, it's not that big as it was with Java 8 or Java 9, for example, where it took like 3 years to do a release. But you can see that now with the half-year releases, we have something like 15 JAPs that are part of a Java release. And this is a quite good number. So I don't think it makes sense to, for example, have a look at all the JAPs. But what I would like to do is just have a look at the JAPs that are part of JDK 17 to understand what we are talking about. So here we can see some things. First of all, we can see new features, new language features, like pattern matching for switch or sealed classes, the first two directly. Or the last one on the left, the vector API. So really new APIs, new features. Then we have really more technical things, like the last one, the macOS ARC64 port. This is the JAP that allows Java to run natively on ARM-based Macs. So you might know that we now have this new Macs with this M1 processors since 1 year or so. And with Java 17, or Java 17 now provides the support that you can run Java natively on Z processors. For Linux and Windows, the support is part of other JAPS. So 391 is only for macOS, but the others are in other JAPS that have been implemented in other versions of Java. So next to all these JAPS that we see here, like 403, 414, and so on, there are some generic or general JAPS. First of all, we have the JAP 0, 1, 2, and 3 that defines the workflows we just looked at. So that defines like, okay, what is a JAP? Here's a list of all the JAPs. How is release of the JDK processed, and so on and so on. So this is really, even that is part of the JAPS, and this is defined in the first JAPS. And next to this, we have two quite important JAPS that are quite new, since we have this new release train, which is JAP 11 and JAP 12. While JAP 11 defines the incubator mode, JAP 12 defines a preview mode. So what does this mean? The incubator mode in general can be used when you have new APIs. One example was the REST client API that has been introduced with Java, I don't know, 9 or 10, something like that. And that first of all was introduced into incubator mode, which means that it was in a specific package, not in the final package, but people are able to access the API and play with the API and give some feedback. And based on this feedback, maybe some things changed. And finally, the implementation was moved to a final package, so Java something package. And I don't know, where maybe with Java 12 or 13, to be fair, I don't know at the moment what was the correct version, where it lost the incubator state and was finally part of Java. And next to this, the preview mode is for really new language features, like, for example, records, like some new tooling, things like that. When we looked at the JAPS of JDK 17, we've seen things like that. So, for example, in the left line, the last one, the vector API, this is a new API, and this is an incubator state. So you can play with the API, you can use it, but it's not final. And JAP 406, the second one, pattern matching for switches, is in preview state. And this means that if you want to, with Java 17, already check this one out, you need to compile your Java class or Java application by using the enable preview flag and execute your Java application by using the enable preview flag. And by doing so, you can already use such preview features and check them out and play with them before they are final part of Java. And this is quite interesting, for example, if you already want to use such things in unit tests, for example. So one thing were text blocks. I assume you know about that since Java, I think since Java 16 is final, that you can now use text blocks in Java and have multi-line strings or multi-line string definitions. And I know a lot of people that already used that in earlier versions of Java because this was quite long as a preview feature in the JDK, starting with, I don't know, maybe Java release 12 or 13. And they already used that feature in their unit tests, but not in their production code. Okay, so this is about the JAPS, and I think we're now coming to an end regarding the structure of the OpenJDK. One thing where we haven't talked that much about, to be fair, are the sources that in the past were hosted in a Mercurial repository and now moved to GitHub, and with Java, I think it was 16, finally completely arrived at GitHub. So even for that one, there was a JAP. So there was a JAP like moving the OpenJDK to Git. And this is part of Java 16, and based on this, the OpenJDK is now completely part of GitHub and uses Git for as a tooling, and therefore, it's much easier and much more convenient to contribute to the OpenJDK. This is one thing next to like new language features, new APIs, where you can see that the work in the OpenJDK is going forward. Sadly, there are still some points where that need much more love to get it into a state where it can easily compare to other really good open source projects. One thing where I, from my point of view, see a big problem is, for example, the issue tracker. So I assume you've never tried to open a bug for the OpenJDK, because that is not easy. So you cannot just go to GitHub and open a bug. The OpenJDK has its own issue tracker that is based on Jira, and it's open, so you can see all the issues. The bad point is that you are not allowed to comment issues, and that you are not allowed to create new issues within this Jira, because only OpenJDK committers have write access to the repository, and therefore only OpenJDK committers can comment on bugs, edit bugs, and create new, not bugs, sorry, issues. Oracle provides a not really user-friendly form to submit a bug, but this is not really related to the OpenJDK, because this is something that Oracle provides. Next to this, you need to add, you need to check checkboxes like, okay, I submit this bug, but it's totally okay for me if you never take care, and things like that. And it's not directly in the system. And even once it's in the system, you cannot really comment on the bugs. There are some workarounds, and I really took some time and go down this rabbit hole to understand how a non-OpenJDK committer can create issues, can commit on issues, and discuss with the OpenJDK team by using issues. I wrote an article about that. If you are interested in that, I've just published the link here. Okay, that's about the OpenJDK. The next thing I would like to have a look at is the Java roadmap, that I assume most of you already know. So in the past, up to Java 8, life was quite easy, right? So we had Java version, I don't know, each 3 or each 4 years, it was released when it's done. And even a year earlier, we know what kind of features will be part of this new Java version. And then we had like 2 or 3 more years to get comfortable with this version, learn about the new features, migrate our application to this version. So that was quite easy. But it was not flexible at all. And it was a big problem. And based on this, starting with Java 10, we have a new release train with Java. And, oh no, sorry. So this was what we had, right? So we had Java versions, a new one, I don't know, all 3, 4 years. From Java 6 to Java 7, it even took 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And the duration or the period where you were able to download them, use them, and get free updates and security updates was quite large, and the overlapping between the versions was quite large too. And even if you are not flexible enough for that, you are able to buy commercial support. So Oracle provided commercial support, for example, for Java 6, 7, and 8 over this several years duration where you receive security updates for free. And then beginning with Java 9 and 10, we had this new release train. And this release train was way more flexible than the previous release train because a new release did not happen or doesn't happen when it's done. A release has a fixed date, and all 6 months a new Java version appears. And as you might know, some of these Java versions only have a lifetime of 6 months, which means after 6 months there will be no security update for such versions. And you have some versions that are called LTS, so long-term support versions, where in theory you get security updates for several years. And this is now a point where we have a huge difference between the vendors of Java binding. If you go to Oracle, for example, you do not get a free LTS for Java 11. Java 11 from Oracle was only available for 6 months, like all the other versions. And after 6 months, you needed to buy commercial support from Oracle. It was even worse because next to that, Oracle changed their license and do not allow people that do not have commercial support even to use the versions for the first 6 months within production. So you're allowed to use it in school for learning Java, on your local machine as a developer, maybe in your build environment, but definitely not in production. And as said, this is where we see a big difference between Java vendors and Java distributions, because some of them has, for example, free LTS support. Some have a shared model with free LTS support and later paid, and so on and so on. But in general, we can say, okay, we have this model now, and we have all 3 years a new Java LTS release in theory. And this means that, okay, we now had Java 17 at the end of the last year, and the next one, as most of you might know, will be Java 23 at the end of 2024. And sadly, or maybe it's even positive, but it was not really good in the press, and there was no really good marketing about this. This has already changed again, because starting with Java 17, within the OpenJDK, there was a proposal that LTS or marked as LTS versions will be now released all 2 years. So this means that not Java 23 will be the next LTS version, but Java 21 will be the next LTS version, and this will be released already next year. Yeah, we're just at the beginning of 22, but it will be released in the end or in the autumn of next year. And next to this, with the release of Java 17, Oracle even changed their license. So as I mentioned, and as you might know, Oracle do not allow to use their binaries in production if you do not have commercial support for Java 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and so on. But starting with Java 7, it looks like they are now allowing to use the binaries free in production, which is a quite good step from Oracle, and now again makes the Oracle binaries again usable for startups, for smaller companies that do not have the money to pay commercial support to Oracle, because it's quite a lot of money that you need to pay, especially if you have if you do something in the cloud environment, for example. or in the front-end environment. But it's not that perfect, because first of all, Oracle says that they will do this until September 2024, and afterwards we at the moment just do not know what will happen. But we can now again use the Oracle binaries for free, which is, from my point of view, already some good news. Okay, we talked a lot about the Oracle binaries and some specific cases regarding the Oracle binaries. Let's have a look at some other binaries. Yeah, I know it's not that easy. I'm currently getting deeper into that to really understand all this terms, licenses, and so on. Let me see if I already have this link. I've already seen that one. Yeah, thanks for the link. Okay, but yeah, anyway, it's better than it was before. I think that's the message here. I wouldn't use it anyway if I do not need commercial support. If I need commercial support, hey, Oracle is a good partner like others. Then you need to think about what kind of commercial support do I want to have. Yeah, I can answer that one too later, because we are now going into that direction. And have a look at other distributions. And as I already mentioned, there are a lot of other distributions. We've already seen this with Map, with the distributions from Amazon, from Azure, and so on and so on. And before we go back to the general distributions, I would like to give an introduction to one specific distribution and to one specific project. And this is the Eclipse Adoptium project and Adoptium working group. And if you have never heard about Adoptium, Adoptium is the successor of AdoptOpenJDK. So what was AdoptOpenJDK in the past is now Adoptium. And because the AdoptOpenJDK project started, let me just skip some things here in the history, started with like 2017 as a quite small project with the goal to provide vendor neutral Java binaries and provide open builds of the OpenJDK. And in 2018, the project started to get successful. There was 1 million downloads, for example, of the AdoptOpenJDK distributions. And even 1 year later, we had over 20 sponsors that paid money or resources, like crowd providers that were sponsors, to the AdoptOpenJDK community project, and we had over 30 million of downloads. And this was a point where it really began to get a huge project with a lot of impact within the Java ecosystem. And the project was just founded based on the London Java user community, and everything that happened within this project was like not part of a company, not part of, in Germany you could say like eingetragener Verein or something like that. So this was just based on the London Java user group or London Java community. And based on this, we decided that it makes sense to move AdoptOpenJDK and what has been created within this project to a foundation. And we had a look at the foundation out there, talked with some of them, and then in 2020 decided to move to the Eclipse Foundation and join the Eclipse Foundation as a top-level project and a working group. And this was a moment where we already had over 200 million download of Java binaries. And yes, this is where we are today. So Adoptium is a top-level project at the Eclipse Foundation. And some very cool players are part of the working group of Adoptium, like Microsoft or Red Hat, Azure, Huawei, Alibaba Cloud, or Karakun, which is the company that I co-founded. and I'm part of the Adoptium working group, and I'm part of the Adoptium project management committee. And one of our main goals, still like we had in AdoptOpenJDK, is to provide an OpenJDK distribution and provide a vendor-neutral OpenJDK distribution, because this is coming from the community and not from one company. And this distribution is called Tamarind. This is what we are providing for free, that everyone can download as a Java runtime. So a lot of people asked me in the past, hey, why is it not called Eclipse AdoptOpenJDK? Why have you changed the name to Eclipse Adoptium? Well, at the end, it's quite easy. We've already talked about this. This is based on trademarks, right? So the Eclipse Foundation wants to trademark all their names, and AdoptOpenJDK was not trademarkable. And therefore, we needed a new name. And at the end, it's like this. You see all the trademarks that are infected within this renaming, because things like Eclipse, Tamarind, Java, AdoptOpenJDK, OpenJDK, Oracle, Adoptium, AdoptOpenJDK, all of those are registered, trademarked, and so on. And this was just the point why we decided to move from AdoptOpenJDK to this new name, Adoptium. And Adoptium is more than just the binaries. And this is one fact why we do not call the binaries Adoptium. Because we plan to do some cool things in the Adoptium working group. I will show some today. And based on this, we decided to change or to name our binaries Tamarind and not just Adoptium. And to be true, by doing so, we are just convenient, right? Because companies like Azure System, for example, have binaries that are named Zulu, Amazon has Pareto, Bellsoft has Liberica, and so on. So what we are doing with Tamarind is just like what all the other companies or vendors are doing. You have a vendor name and you have a distribution name. And this just makes sense because, as I already mentioned, we want to do more than just Tamarind. Okay, now we understand why a custom name makes sense. Then people ask me why Tamarind. This is just a freaky name. It don't make sense. To be fair, this name is perfect for Java runtime based on 2 points you might not know. I will show you. So the first name point is this one. So as you can see, Tamarind is an anagram for runtime, which is quite nice. And next to this, and this is really very cool, Tamarind is the chemical element or chemical connection, I don't know, that is the most nearest one to coffee. So it's not only the name that ends in runtime when you move the letters, it's even something that is really like coffee. And what could be more perfect for a Java runtime than something that has coffee inside? And based on this, I think we really found an awesome name for the Tamarind binaries. Next to Tamarind, we've already started other projects within the Adoptium working group. One that I would like to give you a short introduction to is Aquavit. Aquavit is a test suite for Java binaries. And by using Aquavit, you can test OpenJDK-based builds. The Aquavit test suite was initially developed by IBM and then contributed to AdoptOpenJDK and is now part of its Adoptium. And this is a structure, a test suite, and a list of tests that can be executed to check that an OpenJDK-based build is enterprise ready. Yeah, is there a question? Okay, and for Aquavit, we have different kinds of tests that are executed. So when having a look at Aquavit, you can find 5 different groups of tests. All those tests can be executed in parallel to make the test faster. And we have OpenJDK tests. Those are tests that are part of the OpenJDK. Those are not many, but the OpenJDK contains some tests. Then we have some functional and system tests. The last one, the performance module, contains benchmarks that do not test the correctness of Java, but test that the Java build are fast and fast enough for use in enterprise. And one thing that is quite cool is this external module that contains over 125,000 tests, because here we took the tests, the unit tests, the integration tests from huge Java open source projects, like, for example, Tomcat, like DerbyDB, like TCKs from Eclipse microprofile, and run those tests against the Java binary that should be tested. In general, you can think about that. So first of all, we create an isolated environment like a Docker container, then copy the JDK binary that should be tested into that container, install some tooling that's needed. Let's take Derby as an example. So we check out a defined tag of Derby, build Derby with the JDK that should be tested, and then run all tests of Derby against that JDK. Yeah, so there's one question. Let me answer that one. So the question is, what happened to J9? You might know that there was a project which is called OpenJ9, which is a project from IBM. And this is an alternative to the hotspot VM that is part of the OpenJDK. So this re-implements parts of the Java JVM, and is, from my point of view, a really, really good example and a really, really good project to show that Java is really standardized, because you have 2 different JVMs and you can run your application on a hotspot based, on an OpenJ9 based JVM, and it just works. In AdoptOpenJDK, we provided not only hotspot based builds, we provided J9 builds too. Currently at Adoptium, we do not do that. And this, in general, this is based on licenses, constraints, and things like that. Because next to this Aquavit test suite that we have, with everything we provide as tamarind, we execute the Oracle TCK against our binaries. And so we now have the TCK that is executed where you need, like, paperwork with Oracle. We now provide it as a Java runtime in Eclipse, so there's paperwork between Eclipse and Oracle. We want to call it a Java runtime, and so on and so on. And based on all these points, sadly, we at the moment cannot provide OpenJ9 builds, but IBM is part of the Adoptium working group. We are all aware of that. And IBM currently has their own pipeline to build things. I don't know if they already have a download page. They have a new name for their binary, something like Shinara, a weird name. I think it's a volcano somewhere on Java Island. I don't know if they already have a download page, or is this still somehow in setup mode. Yes, the TCK, the tamarind is TCK certified. This is a big difference against AdoptOpenJDK, because the AdoptOpenJDK builds were not TCK certified. The tamarind builds are. And this certification of the TCK is the only thing in the whole process that we have that is not open source. Because when we built Tamarind, we took the OpenJDK sources. So we have mirrors. In the end, it's really just mirrors from the OpenJDK repositories. We have a repository where we have the code for our installer. So we do not just want to offer a zip. For Windows, for example, we have graphical installers for Tamarind, and to create all the things, we have an open source repository. We have then a repository that contains our build scripts that are based on the OpenJDK build scripts and put in our Tamarind installer builds and put it all together. Those are open source. And we execute the Aquavit tests in the open. To do so, we have an open CI platform, which is a Jenkins, but it's accessible. I mean, you cannot change anything, but you can have a look at the log files, you can have a look at all the builds and so on. And we upload all our distributions in the open too. To be fair, here we really upload our binaries to GitHub. When you download something from our web page, it's just a link to the binaries at GitHub. And the only thing that is not happening in the open here is the TCK. The good thing next to having this openness, what we have defined here is a workflow and a definition of, I would call it like rock solid and enterprise ready Java binaries, because those binaries pass the TCK and pass the Aquavit. And since the Aquavit test suite is open source, we are not, or Tamarind are not the only, it's not the only distribution that provides such tests and does all these tests, and therefore at the end have such a quality, because there are other distributions too. And one big news in Tamarind regarding AdoptOpenJDK is definitely that we are TCK certified now, but as I already said, there are other distributions. And one thing that we are not doing in general with Adoptium is that we at the Eclipse Foundation, for example, offer commercial support. If you have problems with Adoptium, you can always open issues at GitHub. And if you really have a need, you can talk with companies that are part of Adoptium, like for example, Red Hat or Karakun, if you want, or if you have some special needs and need some special help, then there's always somebody who can help you. But a classical commercial support, you cannot get that from Adoptium. But you can get something like that, for example, from Bellsoft with Bellsoft Liberica, or from Azul for Zulu, or from Oracle from the Oracle JDK. And here the support options are completely different. The price is different and so on. In an older talk that I did, I had an overview about the pricing between the different commercial support options of Bellsoft, of Azul, and Oracle, but this always change from time to time, and then they make special options for a special customer. And based on this, I decided that this do not make much sense to have these slides anymore in. From my point of view, when you need to decide what distribution you want to use, I would check a distribution that passes the TCK, that passes the Aquavit test suite, and that has LTS versions. And then you need to decide if you want to pay for commercial support or not. If you do not want to pay for commercial support, I personally would go with Tamarind. If you need commercial support, there are some other options. To get a good overview on all these options, we are currently creating something that is called the Adoptium Marketplace. And I hope that this will be online and available at the end of the first quarter of this year. And this is a marketplace. You see a mock-up currently here, how it might look in future. So the marketplace will be a vendor neutral page service at Eclipse. So it's part of the Adoptium working group, where you can get access to all the Java binaries that are based on our criteria, like passing the TCK, passing Aquavit, being part of Adoptium, and so on. So this is where hopefully within the next, I don't know, 2 or 3 months, you will have a very good website where you can get an update of your Java version and can check what distributions will work for you. Maybe we can even add some additional information here later. So feedback here about the marketplace is more than welcome. What is needed, what would make sense. So this is what I have in general for today. I hope you like what you've seen. So the last part was about Eclipse Adoptium, because from my point of view, this is one of the most important community projects, open projects that are currently out there in the Java ecosystem, because this is the one that helps to keep Java open, vendor neutral, and free. And so I would like, if there are some questions, I see there are already some questions, I will have a look at them in a minute. Otherwise, we can now go into a discussion. If you have some specific questions, want to discuss some specific things. These slides, I will upload them at our Karakun homepage, which is dev.karakun.com, which is our blog and homepage with developer-related content, and you can just download those slides or even older slides that I did around this topic, where you can then, for example, find the prices of the different commercial support options, all on dev.karakun.com. Okay, so let's have a look at some questions. As I said, if some of you would like to just unmute themselves, they can easily ask questions. Otherwise, I will answer your questions. So the first question is regarding the end of life of Adoptium and where you can find a list of end of life. And we have a list, which is the release roadmap, and you can find, and let me just put it here into the chat. So it's adoptium.net/support.html, and there you can currently find, for all the Java versions that we provide at the moment, the latest release, next release, and end of availability. And for some of them, we cannot give a really fixed date. For example, for Java 17, this is not announced so far. And for some others, we have minimum dates until what we definitely will provide support. Not support, but will provide new LTS updates with critical patch updates, so with security fixes and so on. The next question is OpenJ9. I already answered that one. Tamarind TCK certificated. I talked about that one. After Oracle changed the license for its binary distribution, how is the current market share distribution? That's a good question. So the problem is that Oracle does not open their numbers. So we open our numbers. So for Tamarind, you can have a look at the download count. Yeah, where you can see that up until today, more than 13 million people have downloaded Tamarind releases. And for AdoptOpenJDK, this is way more. I can send you this link too. But for Oracle, you will not see so. For AdoptOpenJDK, there are currently 369 million downloads. And for Oracle, you do not get such numbers. But if you talk with people that work in huge companies that have huge clouds where a lot of Java applications, even from other customers, are running, you hear that in that space, AdoptOpenJDK and hopefully then in the future, Tamarind is the mostly used distribution at the moment. And Oracle is the second one. But there are no official numbers about that. So then we have the question if Tamarind supports this enhanced class redefinition. And this is a question that I cannot answer because I don't know. The big question is, I cannot answer the question because I do not have enough knowledge in that area, to be fair. But Clement, so if you are interested in that, you can just contact me on Twitter at, you see it on the screen, or by mail at this one, and I can forward your request or connect you with the right people about that. This week, a new JDK version was released by Oracle. Why is AdoptOpenJDK lagging behind several days or weeks? So when Oracle, or let's call it like that, the versions are always provided by the AdoptOpenJDK. So the AdoptOpenJDK, not AdoptOpenJDK, OpenJDK does a tag. And once this tag is there, the distributions can start to build the binaries for that version, and the distributions can start to run the TCK on those binaries and the Aquavit and so on and so on. And against Oracle, who directly started at that point and have an infrastructure that they have since years to do this as fast as possible and have the best knowledge regarding the TCK, and as far as I know, do not run the Aquavit tests, it's much easier for them to create a Java release. So we had points where, for example, for a Java release, some Aquavit tests, like benchmark tests, were flaky, for example, and then we really needed to run them several times to see and decide if we want to do this release. We even had releases where we do not provided a release for one specific platform, like I don't know what it was, some specific Linux IBM platform thing or something like that, that we had at AdoptOpenJDK, because the builds were fine, but the test results were not fine, and based on this, we just do not release it. And Adoptium and AdoptOpenJDK before is still a community project, which means like it's not that there is one fixed team and it does all the time the same person who does the release. We at Adoptium have release managers, and in general it's somebody out of the project management team. I never do it because I'm not that deep into that area, but the other people from the project management team normally do it, and it rotates who does it. The TCK tests are quite new to us, and there were some hurdles to get the TCK up and running and everything fine. I assume we will get better there and provide updates quite faster in the future. Yeah. Anything else? GraalVM and oh no, I don't want to go out of the meeting. I just wanted to stop sharing. So the question is if I can tell you anything about GraalVM and the relation to Oracle and Adoptium. So GraalVM is a product from Oracle, which is like a new VM that can, like the Java VM, can run applications within the virtual machine and can run Java-based applications within the virtual machine. We at Adoptium do not have any GraalVM builds at the moment because, as I already mentioned, GraalVM is a product from Oracle. There is an enterprise GraalVM and there is a community edition. If you go to GraalVM.org, I think that's the community edition where you can just download GraalVM and use it. But at the end, you have the community and you have the enterprise edition. But at the end, the GraalVM is a product of Oracle and do not belong to the OpenJDK. Some parts of the GraalVM has been created within the OpenJDK or were part of Java. The Java-based Java compiler, for example, that is used in the GraalVM2 for hotspot, or not for compiling a Java class, but for doing this hotspot compilation, has been removed from the OpenJDK, I think with version 14 or 15 or something like that. So there were some parts of Graal in the OpenJDK, but today it's not. And GraalVM next to this is more than a JDK, right? And based on this, and you see, I cannot give that exact answers because this is even for me a topic where I'm not a real expert. In general, currently there is not the goal for us to provide a Adoptium or Tamarind GraalVM or something like that.